Well, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Most of you who are watching this know that Sanona Williams and I both are counselors at Path to Change. But we've gotten together today because we want to talk a little bit about all the racial tension that's been going on in our country and just have a conversation together about that as friends. And knowing that we're not going to get it all right, and we may say something that offends someone, that's not our heart, but we want to just be open in the conversation and invite you to kind of just listen and think through some of the things that we've been thinking through. So I wanted to start just by giving a little perspective of how I got to the point of even wanting to have this conversation. I am someone who has not thought of myself as being a racist person, and when all of this started happening, it really bothered me, the way Black people were being treated, just all the misunderstanding that was there. But I didn't do anything right away because I assumed that my Black friends would know where I stood, that my life would speak for itself. I don't know, and I was really uncomfortable. But Sanona and I had a conversation one morning in the midst of all of this, and seeing her brokenness and her pain moved me to a place where that night I couldn't sleep, and I cried. And it was, for me, the first time I think I really saw her, and the issue became more than just, it's this world, it's this, it's sin, but I saw her, and that moved me to make a Facebook post. And one of my other Black friends on that post commented saying, "Thank you for saying something. Your Black friends are watching to see what you're going to do. Silence equals agreement." And that was incredibly powerful to me. Sanona, could you share a little bit about your perspective on that?
Yeah, and it's funny that you said that your friend responded that way, because I have friends that I've known since high school, elementary school, and I've yet to hear from them. And so it's heartbreaking because silence equals agreement. So I pushed through, but then I'm fortunate that I have other people in my life who have recently come into my life. One of the ladies here who reached out, and I've had clients who are like, "I hope I'm not overstepping. I just want to make sure you're okay." And I'm like, that really means a lot, because again, it's nice to know that we have allies. Not those who are just shaking their head going, "Oh, that's such a shame," but who are willing to stand up and speak out. So yeah, being bold enough to stand with us and to use your voice means a lot. We're looking for allies. We're not just looking for someone to pacify us and say, "Oh, okay, that's so, you'll be okay. Just go back to normal, because normal is what got us here."
Yeah, and I know for me, I was also worried about saying it wrong. I knew I wasn't going to say something totally offensive. I can filter what I say, but I know that as a white person, sometimes it's the small things that are said or not said that also can be hurtful.
I think one of the biggest things, and I'm just going to put it out there because I know people are not going to like it, but one of the most offensive things that we hear is that all lives matter. And the reason is, we know that all lives matter, but what we're saying is all lives really can't matter until Black lives matter. And so until you can look at what we have gone through as a community, and not just in these recent events, but going all the way back through our history in this country, our lives have not mattered. We've been throwaways. And so until you can recognize that Black lives do matter, to say all lives matter minimizes us. And it leaves us feeling like you don't get it, you don't want to get it, you want to remain blind to what's going on. And again, it shows us where you stand, where that allegiance is. And it's like, okay, if that's where you choose to stand, I understand that, I recognize that. That's your position, and I have to make adjustments in how I interact with you.
But then it puts the responsibility back on you.
Yes, we have to prove that we're not trying to separate, and understand segregation wasn't something that we did. It was done to us. We were forced into it. And so when people say, "Well, you're trying to separate yourself," no, we're not trying to do that. We try very hard to fit in, but we're not accepted. We always have to do more to be accepted. And that's hard.
Yeah.
And it's tiring. very tiring. I thought about this when we were driving. I'm like, I have a daughter she'll be a rising junior in college. And she's several times has sent me posts that were put on publications that are part of the school that were very racist, telling the school that they need to send all the black people back where they belong.
Wow.
They don't deserve to be here. And I'm like, this is 2018, and this is the kind of stuff that's going on a very prestigious college campus, and yet there wasn't anything done to really address it. The few students who spoke out, they were placated, and then it was swept under the rug.
Yeah.
So that's what we continue to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that, it makes me think of what I hear people say sometimes, and I don't think they're meaning to be hateful, but they'll make comments like, what happened to George Floyd is so terrible, I can't believe it. I mean, those things hardly ever happen though. I mean, I don't see a lot of racism in my life, but that's not true. Can you speak a little bit to that, just in terms of, because what you're saying is, it happened on your daughter's college campus, but because it wasn't all over social media, nothing really happened with it, and probably not lots of people know about it.
Throughout history, there has been this prevalence of, this type of treatment towards black people. Emmett Till was one. And it's like, we hear about these things, but yeah, because it's easy to sweep it under the rug, we forget about it. The next news cycle comes and it's over. But in our communities, we drive, if my husband and I are driving down a dark country road at night, we're both looking at each other like, okay, let's hope we don't get pulled over, because there's nothing around here. We don't know what the police are going to be like. That's a fear that we have.
Yeah.
And so for people to say it doesn't exist, I think that makes it easy for them to just kind of dismiss it rather than to address that it's here, and especially if there's any, bias of their own. My oldest daughter went to a private school, and she was just sitting outside on the bench one day, and a couple pulled up, and the lady gets out and she looks right at my daughter, and then she looks at her husband and said, make sure you lock the doors.
Wow.
Those are the kind of things that, would she have said that if my daughter had been a white student sitting there? Probably not. So we're accepted when we can entertain, sports, movies, but the second we stand up and want to be treated equally, we're told, athletes are told, shut up and dribble, or sit down and be quiet, or you're a rapper, you don't have a right to say anything, you make a lot of money, you shouldn't have anything to complain about. Money doesn't stop racism. Learn about it, recognize that it's there, and be willing to talk about it.
Yeah, I think for me, the talking about it is what helps the most. I don't know, maybe it's just part of being human or part of being sinful, but when it feels like you could be put in a category that's negative, there's this want to defend yourself that comes up inside of you. And, I think about it like with the Me Too movement. I could be a part of that because I understood that.
Right.
And I would be so mad at men who would say things like, well, not all men are like that. And I'm like, I know not all men are like that, but in this situation, I'm white. And so there's this piece of me that wants to say, but I'm not racist. And yet, if I'm honest, I do have bias. I think we all have bias in some way. And so there's a part of this that for me, I think is just humility of being able to say, there's no way I can understand someone's experience unless I really am like them. And if I can't be like them, at least let me listen really well.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. It's like we all have bias. Even as a black person, I have bias. But I recognize it and I'm able to own it. And I think that's a big part of it, is accepting responsibility and accountability for yourself. Instead of trying to defend, maybe that wasn't right. Or maybe I need to understand why that offends somebody. Why is it okay that they can say that N-word in a rap song, but I can't say it? Just because some people have accepted that kind of as a term to use with each other doesn't mean it gives you the right to do it, because you're not a part of that.
Yeah.
And I think understanding that culturally there are things that white people have that we would never do, and we wouldn't try to cross that line. And it's the same thing in our community. It's the same thing in the Hispanic community and an Asian community. Recognizing the cultural differences are there, appreciate them, but don't try to take them as your own and try to manipulate it to make you feel like what you're doing is okay.
Yeah, I like that. It's like, be who God made you to be, but also be willing to step in somebody else's shoes and to see them and their experience.
And see them. See color. Please see color. Please see color.
Yeah, that colorblind thing can be offensive too, right?
See color. We're different. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Please see color, because that means that you actually are seeing me, but you're seeing beyond that exterior. You're seeing my heart.
Yeah. And that it's God's plan for there to be different colors. That's part of His beauty. That's part of His creativity.
And if you study the Bible, you know that's part of, I mean, He set it up that way because the three brothers, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, looked very different, and they went to create communities that looked very different, but yet they were brothers. So we have to understand God knew what He was doing. He gave us the examples, but we distort and manipulate His word to make it fit our narrative.
Yeah, well, and that, I mean, faith is really where I feel like that's where we connected initially in a deep way, was worshiping together and learning about the Lord together. And for me, even more than being a good person or being a counselor or anything like that, it's being a Christ follower that has convicted me that I have to do what I can do in this situation because Jesus did. Jesus stood up for people who were invisible. He, salvation is for the Gentiles as well as the Jews. I would be going to hell if it weren't for Jesus.
Right.
And so for me, just faith makes it, there's just no question. I have to stand up. I have to learn more. I have to love well.
And as faith and followers of Christ, we're commanded to learn more. And you're right, He was not silent. I cannot imagine that He would be happy with some of the way that the church is behaving today, where they're silent. I mean, He went over and knocked over tables.
I was thinking that.
It'd be ultimate in rioting, if that's what you want to call it, because that was wrong and it needed to be changed and it needed to be addressed. And He was never afraid to stand up and say, hey, even to His followers, I don't care if you don't like the fact that I'm going over here. I'm got to minister to this woman because she believes and she has just as much right to the kingdom as you do. I don't care what you say about him. He has just as much right to be a part of this kingdom. And as Christians, I think, we have to stand up for one another. And as a Black Christian, of course, when I go to my church, my pastor speaks on these things.
Right.
But I remember when I went to a predominantly white church, race wasn't talked about. It needed to be. We were like, we were told this one time, I would never be brave enough to go into a predominantly white church, Black church, the way you guys come here. Because we were there were maybe 3 Black couples in our Sunday school.
Wow.
And it's like, we have to be the ones bold enough to take that step. But come over.
Maybe you can go both directions.
We're welcoming. We would love for you to come over and talk to us and ask. And our faith is what connects us.
Yeah.
And if we start there, then we can begin to tear down the hatred and the differences and just see each other as God's children. That's the start.
I love that you brought up the example that Jesus turned over the tables, because I think, unfortunately, when it comes to a riot or it comes to things like that, you're always going to have the people that take it too far.
Yes.
You're going to have those people that, are sinful in their anger. But it doesn't mean that being angry is sinful.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you don't speak up against injustice. You do it in a way that reflects Jesus.
Yeah. I think when the very first protest happened here in Atlanta, that Friday night, the day we spoke, my daughter went down. Her and a friend, they went down, they participated in the protest, they marched to the Capitol, they stood out there, and then she was back home. And we're watching the news, and they're showing the rioters, and she's like, that's not us. Those were a different group of people who did not have the peaceful protest in mind. Those were the people that wanted to just destroy property, and there were some intermixed in there who were still peacefully protesting. But it's like, we've got to be careful not to lump, just like, you know, they don't want us lumping all police officers together.
Yeah.
You can't lump all protesters together, and people do that. They intermix protesters and rioters. They're two different groups.
Yeah.
You just gotta talk about it, listen to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't write off everyone because of one person.
Right.
Like you said, whether it's rioters, whether it's police officers, whatever, it's, yeah, being willing to see each person for who they are.
Pull out the bad apple. Because if
Yeah.
you leave the bad apple in with everything else, what happens? You ruin all of them.
Yeah.
If you pull that one out and you deal with it, you still have a really good group of people
Yeah.
that can work together, and that is really prevalent in the police department. You know, the fact that they rally around someone who's done something that they know is wrong, again, speaks volumes, and I think they have to be willing to stand up and say, that's not right. That's not right what you did. I support you as my fellow co-worker, but what you did, that was wrong. The same way you and I would do as counselors.
Absolutely.
So we
Yeah.
have to be able to hold each other accountable.
Yeah. Yeah. To speak truth also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Last thing, because we are running out of time.
Okay.
What do we do as a white person? You know, I have ideas of what I think I could do, but I would love to hear from your perspective what's really helpful and what's just kind of to make me feel better, but it's like not really doing any good.
Study, read, learn about history, not just what you get in school, because that's very whitewashed.
Yeah.
You know, I love the fact that now people are talking about Black Wall Street and the way it was destroyed and the symbolism of Tulsa. But people didn't talk about, I didn't learn about that until I was an adult. Do your reading. Ask questions. That's the biggest thing. Don't be afraid to ask a question, because most Black people we want to be able to say, hey, read this book, or we can talk about this, or here's my experience, and listen instead of trying to defend. Listen with the intent of learning. But what can you do? You know what? It's great if you want to go and march in a protest. That's great. We support that. But, you know, come be a part of our community. Just come explore what it's like to be in our shoes. You know, come talk to us. Come hear our stories. Come visit our churches and see what it's like. That's a shocker for some people because the music is different.
Yeah.
But
I think it goes a little longer sometimes.
oh
too.
yeah, yeah, it can go a little bit longer. Definitely can go a little bit longer. But that's because oftentimes the spirit gets moving and it just happens. But again, come see. But read, study. There are tons of books and websites and podcasts and all these things. And I think if you just start to educate yourself, you know, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And the more knowledge we have, the stronger we are. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, one of the things that I think I've really been reflecting on, in addition to the learning piece of it, is recognizing there's a space for white people to have a voice in this. And that there are times where me saying something to a white person who's made a comment, maybe just unknowingly,
Right.
might be even heard better than a Black person saying something in that moment. And so just recognizing, like, even when it's those small things, it's so important for me to say something.
Yeah.
And with my kids, you know, just being intentional to get books that expose them to different people, to do just events that expose them to different cultures and celebrate people who are different from us.
Absolutely.
Those are some of the things that I feel like right now feel really, really important to me.
And they are, and you're right, you know. Juneteenth March was awesome
Yeah.
because we saw people of all colors coming together, and they recognized the significance of that day. But that's something else. Educate your kids on those things. Black History Month should not just be relegated to 1 month. It should be a constant learning about that culture and the heritage, because it is a big part of American history.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, at that march, one of the things that was said that stood out to me was something like, don't let this just be a march, let this be a lifestyle change. And that really just stuck with me. Like, if this last couple of months is only, you know, a blip on the radar, and we go back to, like you referred to earlier, just kind of go back to everyday life and forget this time,
Yeah.
then nothing much good came out of it. And that would be extremely sad.
It would.
Yeah.
So we gotta continue to move forward and
Yeah.
talk about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I would love for us to work together on coming up with some kind of a resource that for people who watch this video, they can just click on and have some ideas of good books to read,
Yeah.
good websites to visit, just ideas that we might have as we brainstorm. Does that?
That sounds like a perfect idea.
Okay.
That would be good.
Okay. So thank you everybody for hanging with us all this time, and please check out the other link that I'm going to post today as well, just for ideas if you'd like something to do that's different than what you've already thought of.